Hey, Warrior Saints, Father Chris here. Welcome to the Way of the Warrior Saint Weekly, where we are striving to find greatness by living a crucifixional life. Today, we're going to have a fun, fabulous time with a great biblical story about David and Goliath. Come on. The story of David and Goliath comes to us from 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel 17. Great story, great chapter. Let me give you a little background, a little history of the story. The armies of the Philistines and the armies of the Israelites, God's people, are standing across from one another, waiting to engage in this battle. Kind of like Jon Snow and Ramsay Bolton in the Battle of the Bastards in season 5 of Game of Thrones. Great stuff. On the Philistine side, there is this guy named Goliath, Goliath of Gath. Goliath, it says in 1 Samuel 17, is 6 cubits and a span. That means he's 9 feet tall. Goliath has this big spear, a shield. He's wearing armor that weighs 5,000 shekels worth of gold, 125 pounds. Now you imagine this huge beast of a man, 9 feet tall, 125 pounds of armor with a spear and a shield and a sword. And he's got a guy running in front of him carrying all his toys and his weapons. And he stands on his line and he's taunting the people of God. He says, hey, come out. Where are you? Let's fight. Tell you what, you bring me your best warrior, the best one you've got, the very best fighter, and we'll fight, just he and I, just the two of us, kind of like Jon Snow and Ramsay Bolton. And he says, if you win and kill me, all of the Philistines will serve you. But if I win and I destroy you, then all of the Israelites will serve us. And for 40 days and for 40 nights, he kept calling out. And for 40 days and 40 nights, the king of Israel, Saul, and all of his armies stood there in fear and dread and did nothing. Now one day, a little shepherd's boy comes. His name is David. And David says, what's going on here? He goes to see the battle, and he goes to greet his brothers who are in the Israelite army. And he's scratching his head and he says, why is this guy standing here taunting and mocking the armies of the Most High God, and nobody does anything? Why don't you people do anything? I don't understand it. How can you let this guy continue to taunt the Most High God? And all of the people say to him, well, it would be great, but who can do that? And David gets it up in his mind, and he says, look, enough. And he goes to the king Saul. And he says to the king, I'm going to fight this guy, and I'm going to win. I'm going to do it in the name of God, and I will conquer this guy, and I will win. And Saul says, huh? I mean, how are you going to win? This guy's a huge monster. He's been fighting since he was a little baby. You're just a little kid, just a little shepherd's boy. How are you going to do this? And David says, oh, the Lord will protect me. He will keep me safe, just as he kept me safe when I was fighting the lions and the bears. And Saul says, yay, David. And he puts his armor on him, and he gives him a spear, gives him a shield, he gives him a sword, and he says, go and fight and do things with all of this armor. And David, as a little kid, he's like, I can't do this. This is uncomfortable. It's heavy. I'm not used to it. I don't know how to do it. So he takes it off. It's very interesting. He grabs the shepherd's staff, and he goes to the creek, and he scoops out 5 smooth stones, and he puts them in his bag. Now, if you've read the Bible, and even if you haven't, you probably know what happens in the rest of the story. David goes out and he stands on the field, and the big monster Goliath says, who the heck are you? What do you think, I'm a dog that you're going to send this little peewee out to fight me? And David says, today, son, the Most High God is going to put you down. Puts the rock in a sling, whoosh, into his forehead, boom, Goliath is dead. And all of the people of Israel are like, yay, David. And David, by his relentless devotion to God, conquers the monster. Now look, David's a bad dude. The rest of the story in Samuel, he becomes a bad dude. But at this point in chapter 17, he hasn't yet become that bad dude. And it's really interesting to look at and examine that story and see what it really means. Is it really about some huge monster guy and a little boy, or is it about something very different? All right, to understand the context of this story, and then to turn and see how it applies to you and I in our lives practically, we first have to understand the people of God, Israel, and the Promised Land. And what it means is this. When the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, God said, I take care of you, and I will put you into the Promised Land. And he leads them through Moses, And just on the edge of the promised land, he turns them over to Joshua and he says, go into this promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey. Except I want you to remember something. I'm your king, says God. I will be your king and I will shepherd you as a father. Do not be like all the rest of the people and ask for a king. Do not be like the rest of the nations and ask for a king. I will be your king, says God, and I will take care of you the way a shepherd does his sheep. And the people say, yay, God. And they go into the promised land. And you know what they did first? They asked for a king. And God said, what? And Samuel said, what? And God said, fine, they want a king? Give them a king. And they gave them the first king, Saul. Now what is Saul, the name? What does it mean? The name Saul means asked for. It'll be important. Asked for. Now as you follow the rest of the story, David becomes the king. David is the one who is a student, a prodigy of Saul, and ends up taking the throne away from Saul. What does David mean? What's his name? What's the importance in the name David? The name David means the beloved. Why is that important? I'll tell you. It's important because we see in this story placed before us two opposing ideas, two juxtaposed ideas that are really not in harmony. Saul, as he stands there to fight the great monster Goliath, is the way that the people want. It is the way of the nations. It is the way of the world. It is to fight the army. It's to fight the monster the way the monster fights. And you can see it in Saul when he wants to put all that armor on David. And he says, do it the way of the world. He's this big monster with all his shields and armors. You do the same thing. And God says, well, people, you asked for it. But it didn't work. Now David, in contrast, the beloved one, he says, look, I can't do this. The way of the world with all the armor, it doesn't work. I'm not comfortable. So he sheds it and he takes the staff of the shepherd and he gets 5 stones out of the water. Now why 5? He only used 1. The story tells us the first shot did the trick. Why pick 5? He picked 5 because it is the law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The first 5 books of the Bible were for the ancient Israelites, and even for the Jewish people today, and for us as Christians also. It's called the Torah, the law. It is the beginning, the foundation upon which the rest of the text is written. And what David is saying, that I will conquer this monster by following the law, the commandments of God. You can do it the world's way, because you asked for it, Saul, or you can do it the way of God, the beloved. And the fascinating part of all of this story is that Goliath, the great monster, he reveals which way works. By putting this Goliath monster in the story, it is revealed which way works. Saul's way, the way of the world with all the armor, and to fight the world the way the world fights, they were afraid and they knew that they would lose and be under submission to Goliath. The Lord's way, through his beloved David, it was revealed through victory over Goliath, that indeed, by living the life that God has commanded us to live, it works. Want to know something really cool? You know what the name Goliath means? Revealed. So you can see embedded in the text is a choice. There's a monster. The monster of the world, this Goliath, who will reveal what works. And you have your choice. Do it the world's way. Saul, you asked for it. Or the Lord's way, through the law and the commandments of God. The story of David and Goliath is not to tell us about this huge monster of a guy.
It's not possible. He's a giant.
It is to tell us that fighting monsters can only be conquered God's way. You and I can only be victorious, not the world's way, God's way, by following the commandments of God. And so we see it, that God's way works. And so how does that apply to my life? And I think it applies like this. Imagine in your own life, your own monsters, your own Goliath. I have them. I'm sure you've got them too. What is the Goliath in your life? Are you a student facing a huge deadline for a major test or a big project? Are you fighting with someone? A husband with a wife with a husband, with a parent, with a son, with a daughter, with a friend, with a coworker, with a boss? Is there friction or fighting with someone? How's your health? You in good shape? Are you sick? You eat too many Doritos? Spend a lot of time with the doctor? Taking a lot of pills? In the hospital? Come on, man. How's your health? You see, deadlines and tests and fighting with people and health and Doritos. Those are monsters. Those are monsters that we have to fight. And though they may seem like simple, mundane images for us, they're pictures of the Goliath at large that we have to fight every single day in our lives. You and I are constantly fighting monsters. We're constantly fighting Goliaths. And each one of them has an opportunity for us to reveal in our minds and hearts what works. Saul, you asked for it, the ways of the world, or David, following the commandments of God. And I'm here to tell you, pretty simple, and I think you probably know it, and you probably know what I'm going to say. But in truth, the only way that really works is by following the commandments of God. It's what works. That's why we're here. That's why we do this. That's why you watch this. Because you know, and I know, it works. And so what is the commandments of God? What's the full picture of those 5 stones that David picked up? And it is, as we say in every single lesson, to live a crucifixional life. The sacrifice of self for the sake of another. The sacrifice of self for success. The sacrifice of self to become what we were designed and supposed to be. Crucifixional living is the way of the 5 stones. Crucifixional living is the way of the warrior saint. And so what does that mean? How do I find practical application in that? How do I, as we do every week, find today's practical point on the way of the warrior saint? I think today's practical point is really one that's ultimately really clear, but it's worth repeating. I know that when I hear myself say it, I find value in it because I need to hear it again. And so let's start with school. Let's start with tests. Let's start with projects. Let's start with deadlines. And I think this applies equally to gents and ladies in business. But for our young people, come on, man, you got a test tomorrow. You can't stay up and play Fortnite. You can't play Sims. You can't watch reruns of Friends. You have to do something sacrificial. I mean, I don't like Fortnite and I don't like reruns of Friends, but believe me, I'd rather sit and watch and play than do my homework, for sure. But if I want that A, if I want to find that success, if I want to give twice as much as I think I can, I got to turn it off. I got to put Fortnite down, put Sims down, put the remote control down, and do what? Open your textbook and study. And look, you don't even have to put your phone down today, right? I know you can study on your phone. They have apps to teach you, so you don't have to even break that addiction right there. Just play with your phone. Perfect story. My daughter today, true story, driving her to school this morning, and she's playing on her phone. And I said, Baba, what are you doing? This is our time. This is my time to talk. What are you doing? I want to be with you. Put your phone down. She said to me, Baba, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? She said, I have to study for my test. Oh, really? I said, you have to study for your test? I said, this is our time. You played Sims last night and you watched Friends with your mother last night and infringed on my time with you because you didn't study and now you have to cram it all in on your app on the phone? I said, no way, silly girl, no way. Put that phone down and let's visit. We did have fun, by the way. I hope she gets her A. But the point is, do your homework, sacrifice a little bit so you can be successful on your test today. How's your health? Feeling good? I don't know, man. It's tough out there. I mean, how's your heart? You in good shape? Carrying a few extra? Do you have to size up on the pants? I mean, you see, taking care of our body is part of our responsibility. Look, as a warrior saint, you have to be in good shape. It's like that whole mask on the airplane thing, right? They tell you to put the mask on yourself if there's a cabin pressure loss. Put the oxygen on yourself first and then put it on the other guy. Not because I want to make sure that I live and if he dies, well, too bad about him. No, you put it on you so that you can help him. That's the point. You take care of yourself for the sake of being able to take care of other. That's why God wants us to be healthy. He doesn't care what you look like per se and that you need to pose in like those bodybuilder competitions. He's just saying take care of yourself so you can take care of the others. And so if you're like me, you have a very big problem, a love affair even, with Doritos. Me loves me some Doritos, but they don't get it done. If I want to be healthy and live a long life so I can take care of my wife and my girls and see my children and my grandchildren and maybe even my great-grandchildren, I got to break up with the Doritos. I have to sacrifice a little bit of what I want so I can be healthy. And the last practical image I want to give us is relationships. I mean, you married? You fighting with your wife? You fighting with your husband? Are you fighting with your parents? Are you fighting with your kids? Work? School? Is there a relationship somewhere where you're having a hard time and you know, it's just that, it's that moment where like there's so much angst and there's so much pressure built up and you don't want to talk to them and like they have to come back and apologize to me and they are wrong, not me, and how dare they do and say to me what they did and said, and they have to come to me and apologize. If we find ourselves fighting with someone, it's time to be crucifixional. It's time to be the 5 stones and to go and make peace. And look, I know it's hard. I know it's hard to go back and say, I'm sorry. Like, look, fellas, you fighting with your wife? Like, and I know how they can be. And ladies, the same for us guys. I mean, I get it. It's hard to go back and say, you know what? I was wrong. You know what? I'm sorry. I know how hard it is. Look, I was wrong once. I had to do it. It's terrible. But you have to do it. You have to be sacrificial. You have to be crucifixional, to put yourself, your ego, all of it aside so that you can heal and mend that relationship. I mean, do you want to spend the rest of your life fighting with your wife and fighting with your husband and fighting with your children and fighting with your parents and with your boss and with your coworkers and with people in the world? Or would you rather sacrifice a little bit of your ego so that you can find peace and harmony with those people that you live with and the people that you interact with in the world and in the workplace and in school? Of course you want that. It requires, therefore, that we are crucifixional, using God's way and not the way of the world, to sacrifice Fortnite so I can study, fighting with my wife so that I can make peace, and eating Doritos so that I can be healthy. This is the life. This is what it means to be crucifixional. Here you have before you your own Goliath, your own monster. Perhaps it's a fight, perhaps it's Doritos, and perhaps it's school. Perhaps your monsters are something entirely different. But nevertheless, you are presented with your own Goliath who will reveal for you whether the way of the world or God's way is the way that works. And I'm telling you, brothers, and I'm telling you, sisters, God's way works. Be not like Saul, be like David. Take in your bag the 5 smooth stones of the law, which is to sacrifice self for the sake of other, crucifixional living, and continue to walk on the way of the warrior saint. I promise, if you do it, the success you envision today, double, at least double. Go get some. Till next time, keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.